tells NBC News that in February 2017, Trump's personal bodyguard and a Trump Organization lawyer showed up.
Hello, my name is Kelechi Madabuko, and I am making a presentation on marketing, psychiatric rehabilitation, public service announcement. This is a rehabilitation counseling class 5350 for Dr. K. Kasalik. My question is, would you recognize a person with mental disability if you met one? I can assure you the answer is no, because they look like us. They are our dads, moms, brothers, sisters, co-workers, fellow students, and even our children.
This is a sign again of sort of the heavy-handed tactics used by Trump and his crew.
Let's continue with our presentation. Definition of psychiatric disability. People with psychiatric disability are because of mental illness, unable to attain age and culture appropriate goals for extended period of time. There are three parts to this definition. The first one is psychiatric disability are based on diagnosable mental illness. Second, a person with psychiatric disability is not able to pursue significant life goals because of mental illness. The third one is both the mental illness and interference with the attainment of goals persist for significant periods of time, in most cases for years. Note, conceptual domains are important for understanding the nature of psychiatric disability. Here's another stereotype being leveled on people with mental illness. It says that people with mental illness are dangerous and unpredictable. Reality says that most people with mental illness never commit acts of violence and are more likely than others to be victims of violence. The next question is, who might benefit from psychiatric rehabilitation services? The most common forms of mental illness undiagnosed who might benefit from psychiatric illness services are people with anxiety disorder, mood disorders, schizophrenia disorders, people with PTSD, obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. Here's another stereotype. People with mental illness are incompetent. Reality, the stereotype could not be further from the truth. Examples of such as Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill, Ernest Hemingway demonstrate their incompetency needed to accompany a mental health condition. And all these people were well notable people in the world. Let me also acknowledge that all my references are from the Patrick W. Corrigan Principle and Practice of Psychiatric Rehabilitation, an Empirical Approach. On this slide, we'll be talking about the Americans with Disability Act, ADA. The ADA seeks to eliminate discrimination in 5 areas: employment, transportation, telecommunication, public accommodation, business of local and state government. Another typical stereotype: people with mental illness deserve blame for their conditions. Here's the reality. As research has shown, life experiences, trauma, and biology are to blame for mental illness, not the person with a diagnosis. What are the principles of psychiatric rehabilitation? The principles is to have an impact on individuals and their challenges and strengths relative to personal goals. This is almost meant to have an impact in their community, the venue in which goals are pursued and achieved. Psychiatric rehabilitation has evolved several important principles that guide the providers in their engagement of people with disabilities and in the community in which they live. Principles for approaching the person. Recovery, which has been held as the first principle of mental health services for people with psychiatric disability in the US. Recovery based health system echo the research summarized that most people learn to live with psychiatric disabilities, even if they do not erase the challenges altogether. Stereotype again. People with mental illness have little hope for recovery. Here's the reality. Research has shown that most people who receive treatment do improve, including those with serious conditions like bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. We continue with the principles of psychiatric rehabilitation. In part, this reflects notions of recovery as an outcome, meaning that the symptoms of illness and barriers of disability diminish or disappear. Hope is a rule rather than the exception. Rehabilitation providers foster setting and interaction in which future opportunity and success are framed as not just possibility but probabilities. This does not mean that rehabilitation provider ignore people's worries about the future of their questions of doubt and self-worth. To do so, we will ignore essential experiences. Instead, these experiences are framed in terms of hope. Another stereotype. I am not going to allow dangerous people like that to move into my neighborhood. Reality, these dangerous people could be your relatives. Would you like them to be homeless? I'm also acknowledging my reference, which is coming from Patrick W. Corrigan, Principles and Practice of Psychiatric Rehabilitation, an Empirical Approach. What specific strategies are used in psychiatric rehabilitation to promote positive outcomes for individuals with psychiatric disabilities? Strategies are the tools rehabilitation providers use to help people accomplish their goals. These are discrete behavioral activities by means of which providers engage people to help them move forward. These include, but not necessarily limited to, this list: basic listening skills, problem solving, instrumental and social support, shared decision making, goal setting, skill training, transfer training, cognitive rehabilitation therapy, mindfulness, family education and support, relapse prevention, and harm reduction. Stereotype. People with mental illness are different from me. Reality. There is no difference. Rather, they are fellow human beings. In what setting might one participate in psychiatric rehabilitation services? Service providers operate rehabilitation programs, select interventions that help persons attain their rehabilitation goals within a person's social environment. The settings are as follows: residential venues, persons with serious mental illness; vocational program, many rehabilitation goals are best served by addressing a person's vocational ambitions; activities and recreation, some persons are either not ready for or prefer not to pursue work. They may be overwhelmed by psychotic or other symptoms, or may lack the social and coping skills they need to meet the demands of competitive work. Stereotype: hey, there is Joe. He's a mental patient. Reality: right way to address Joe is the patient with mental health issue. What roles exist in the psychiatric rehabilitation services structure? The final element in the model is in the model role, which is the formal and informal position assumed by different groups of stakeholders in the realization of psychiatric rehabilitation. Stakeholders can cause psychiatric rehabilitation to change shape significantly. The central role or position in the individual rehabilitation program is that the person, him or her, has the responsibility for deciding the goals of their service, as well as the venue in which service occurs. Family support is an important term in rehabilitation programming. To the person's support, family members, parents, siblings, spouse, partners, and or children should be active participants in the rehabilitation plan. When the person requests such assistance, as should other supportive individuals the person may identify. Stereotype: a child is often assumed to be genetically and psychologically contaminated by the parent's condition, which renders the child damaged good. The answer is no. Psychiatric rehabilitation service structure continues. The other important group in the equation: team of rehabilitation providers who are both multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary. Multidisciplinary, that members of the rehabilitation team come from a variety of professional backgrounds of rehabilitation counseling, psychiatry, social work, clinical psychology, and nursing. Interdisciplinary, also, rehabilitation providers are interdisciplinary, which means they do not permit the specialization of their individual discipline, suggests that some tasks are uniquely within their purview, while the rest of the intervention are somebody else's work. What role does research evidence play in psychiatric rehabilitation? The role of research evidence is as an evidence-based practice defined as intervention shows that there is a consistent scientific evidence that they improve client outcome from what is called sufficient scientific evidence, which means that the best evidence comes from carefully controlled studies where rehabilitation intervention of interest is compared to another strategy. Example: intensive care coordination is compared to office-based intervention. Research evidence, in turn, bringing mental health services researchers, consumers, family advocates, clinicians, and administrators to identify 6 evidence-based practices for individuals with serious mental illness. Supported employment is one of them. I'm also going to acknowledge my reference book, The Principles and Practice of Psychiatric Rehabilitation, an Empirical Approach by Patrick W. Corrigan. Research evidence continues. The second point is ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Theory, Illness Management and Recovery, Family Psychoeducation, Integrated Dual Disorders and Treatment, Medication Management according to protocol. Evidence-based practices are well defined according to a set of operationally defined principles and therefore can be and have been replicated faithfully in diverse settings according to fidelity scales, which are measures that assess the degree to which a particular program meets the standard of a program model. Here are some local rehabilitation services in El Paso, Texas. There's the Sunwest Behavioral Health Organization, LLC, which is on 10501 Gateway West, El Paso. Zip code is 79925. And their phone number is 915-544-3500. Local rehabilitation services centers in El Paso continues. We have the Emergency Health Network, formerly known as the MH/MR. This is located on 1600 Montana Avenue, El Paso, Texas 79902. Area code number is 915-887-3410. They do accept patients from age 6 and up. Another psychiatric rehabilitation service center in El Paso, Texas, is the Atlantis Behavioral Health, which is on 10501 Gateway Boulevard West, East Side, El Paso. And their phone number is 915-544-3500. These are the centers where people with illness, if they need help, can go there and obtain help. So having had the presentation that I made, you still believe you can see someone with a mental illness and be able to recognize with certainty? I still think the answer is no. The only support we can give as a community is to support those and not to discriminate against them. There are parents, they could be our mom, our dad, brothers, sisters, co-workers, like I stated before. So treat everyone with respect and dignity, and you'll make this world a better place. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye. References for my presentation came from scattergoodsfoundation.org/stereotypes. Corrigan, P.W. Musser, K.T. 2012. Principles and Practice of Psychiatric Rehabilitation, an Empirical Approach by Guilford Press.